Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining the Behind Company Lines podcast. Today we have Emily Yuhas, CEO and co-founder of Awtomic Subscriptions, where they are helping e-commerce brands build brand loyalty, increase lifetime value, and build sustainable businesses with the power of trustworthy subscriptions. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show. Like I said before the show, I'm really excited to dive into your background, being very much startup focused and working on different companies and different products from a product mindset and now as a founder. So really excited to dive into the questions I have prepared. But before we get into all that good stuff, what were you doing before you started Awtomic?
Yeah, I'm excited to be here too. Thanks, Julian. So before Atomic, I had a long career as a product manager at tech companies. So I started at Microsoft and then worked my way through an original kind of entrepreneurial journey, and then through smaller startups all the way up to kind of mid-sized to large startups. And then just before Atomic, I was working at Eventbrite for a few years, which was a really great experience, focusing on delivering a fully new checkout flow for the platform, and also helping event creators market their events via email, paid social ads, and custom websites. And so that translated really nicely over to working with direct-to-consumer brands, because it's all kind of creative entrepreneurial folks, which are, some of my favorites to work with. I'm learning new things from them every day.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And correct me if I'm wrong, Eventbrite kind of went through a somewhat of a pivot in the last few years. Is that?
I would say the core kind of product
Yeah,
is mostly the same, but I think there's more emphasis lately on. There's been kind of some interesting emphasis on music. There's been
sure.
some emphasis on making things more kind of self-service. As one of the first kind of self-service electronic ticketing platforms, and so that's always been a bit of a strength. But there's been some interesting navigation recently, especially through the pandemic. But yeah, it's been an interesting time for live events.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I was looking into your background and before it's on, I think Eventbrite, you were working with developing products for a couple of startups and from the ground up, kind of building them from scratch and working with their engineering teams. How was that experience? Is there anything that you've seen that's similar across the startups that you've worked with and built products with? What's similar and what's different from your different experiences building products?
Yeah, it's so interesting because my first role in product, like post college, is at Microsoft in Office, which is huge. I mean, there's like over 500 million users, I think, at the time, maybe more now. And so, yeah, everything. And at the time, they were on 3-year release schedules, which was, now it seems totally just no one would ever do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, at the time, that was somewhat normal. And obviously, for such a big software suite, making any change, even moving like the bold button or changing the visual of the scroll bar is a really big deal, because of so many reasons, like accessibility and just like the number of people that use and depend on the software every day. And then my kind of second role was at a 13-person seed stage startup where, we were focused on problems like, can you log in? So it's interesting because, yeah, I think there are a lot of differences when it comes to like size and complexity. I think one thing that really surprised me going from that leap, and then, having experience out at companies of almost every size, is I think when you're at a big company, you start to be really frustrated with the amount of process. And it feels like, oh, there's so much process, I can't get anything done. And then when you're in like really small, kind of chaotic environments, you're like, oh my gosh, I need process like to get anything done. And so one thing that struck me like right in the beginning from that experience, that process is necessary, but you need like the right level of process, and it needs to be tailored to like the stage of the company. So like Microsoft level process at a 13-person company is completely not necessary, but having thoughtful process at any company is necessary. And
Yeah.
I think that's something that I've been able to bring, to my company now, is we do use a lot of best practices from, larger companies. And I think that it makes us more efficient as a small company ultimately. Whereas I think, a lot of small companies just, and like from my experience joining them, just kind of jump in and wing it with a lot of things that have to do with, product definition and prioritization and things like that. And it does help to have some frameworks in place and some process to actually really get the most out of everyone's time and be kind of efficient and be constantly learning from what you're building and from your users when you don't necessarily have the volume to do things like really quick, effective A/B tests and things like that.
Yeah. What is the process like, and what are the frameworks that you use?
Yeah, so we keep a pretty rigorous roadmap document, for example. We always have it available to our team. We go through it. We have a metrics meeting every week where we go through our key metrics. We go through our roadmap with the team. We talk about what's coming, if anything has changed. We go through the things that are in progress and where they are and when we think we'll deliver them. So we do kind of have everything documented. We talk through them, these things regularly. We also, use Jira board. We kind of work Kanban style now where, everything we decide to work on from our roadmap does get turned into designs and a PRD. We actually started initially without that process and found that introducing it was a big kind of help for all of us, just for clarity. We're a fully remote team.
Yeah.
And so, we do go through kind of like a traditional product development process where we have the PRD, we have people review it, we break it down into tickets, we prioritize it, we assign the, tech
Yeah.
leads to each project and we work through them. And I think, it did take us a while to get to that as our right level of process because I think it would sound heavy to a lot of small companies, but, we are, and like I said, a remote team in a lot of different time zones. So we have to have a certain level of structure in order to keep everyone kind of like able to run
Yeah.
at the pace we need and not have to like wait 24 hours for an answer to something. So, it has been a bit of a, journey getting to, again, that right level of process. But I think, it ends up often being maybe more than you initially think that ends up actually making for the most effective output.
Yeah. Yeah. I think from what I've just gained to understand about a lot of founders, especially early on in their founder experiences, they struggle with to implement structure. And some, continue this cowboy mindset or cowgirl mindset in the wild, wild west, or they try to bring in, if they come from a bigger company, this overly mature structure for what their business is capable of, or even, it's not necessarily useful to how to move and progress forward with their team. How do you start to implement structure over time? Do you have any key indicators that trigger you to implement some type of structure? Is it just a part of the evolution of the product? Talk to me a little bit about kind of that process, being that it's so important for when you're building products for companies that are direct to consumer, because I'm assuming you get a lot of feedback. You have to make iterations on those products and make sure everything's running because they rely on their consumers to have that accessibility. But what does that implementation of the structure look like in your mind?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, I think a big part of it is team feedback. So we take, our team's feedback really seriously, and we should do retros more than we do. We do retros, and when we have feedback, I think it's often, I think some people have allergic reactions to people asking for process. I think that actually it's better to just try it because it's never set in stone, right? I think having a really fluid mindset about it is important. Like there's nothing, if it's really heavy, then you probably shouldn't be thinking about it at the current stage if you're a seed stage company. If it's something that you can easily try, or you can think of a way to easily try, like try it for a couple weeks and see, because you can always then evaluate, like, is this actually making us more productive? Is it too much weight? The reality of being in a startup is that often things that are not helpful end up not happening anymore. So you kind of get a pretty quick view of like, is this idea actually helping the team? Is it worth the time that's invested? And so, yeah. And like, for example, I mentioned we weren't doing like formal PRDs before, and then somebody suggested it. We started doing it. We saw a massive improvement in just like clarity of what we were building, people being able to like take things and run with them, reduction in, bugs, kind of, for lack of a better word, just, it's something's not specified. It's hard to say, was it a bug? But yeah, like basically, I guess time from a feature being kind of developer complete to it actually being released to the world, because there's just less back and forth because the expectations are documented. So that was an example of something that somebody asked for that we did that ended up being, we consistently saw value from and continued doing. And another example that kind of went the other way is, and that I think we'll have to bring back at some point, but, for example, go to market process comes up quite a bit in terms of like any feature we release. It's nice to think about things like help articles and are we going to announce it in a product update and, anything that we need to prepare for the launch. But again, because we're a startup, like realistically, we're not going to hold a feature because there's not a help article. Like if it's really going to provide value to customers, like we're going to get the feature out. And so, that's an example of something that like we've talked about. We haven't found exactly the right level in terms of formal process that is, that meets our current priorities. Like our priority at the end of the day is speed and value. And so that kind of serves a lot of the decisions there is like, is it actually making us faster? Is it helping provide value to customers? It's kind of like the high level framework. And I think, a big thing that I see a lot of startups struggle with is less even on the process side, but more on the, I guess, the product definition side. I think what is harder for people even than process is knowing how much to build to get the answer they need, like how much to build into the product. I think there's so much temptation to just design like what you think is the perfect full solution and build that. And that is almost never the right answer. I think that is what I've seen people struggle with even more than, like the day-to-day operations type process. I think having really rigorous understanding, like, okay, I want this feature, whether it's because, customer asked for it or because it's part of my vision or because, whatever the driving factor is, really having an honest look at like, what is the minimum thing I can build to understand if this is valuable and then decide if I want to invest more versus like, what is the, Ferrari version of it that I could imagine and build. And, for my time working at smaller companies that weren't my own, especially, I saw that being like a much bigger struggle ultimately. Like, okay, the founder wants us to build this super fancy feature. We spend months and months building it. It gets out, turns out like 10% of it is valuable to customers. Right. So I think, those things combined.
So is learning and is the right answer, building a minimum value product and then shipping out to your customers and then feedback kind of guiding the next iteration of that?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's kind of, there's so many like cliche things like move fast and break things. I mean, they're all like kind of true, right? Like the MVP is, such an overused term in some ways, but it is so true. Like really just that essence of, you only just accepting that you only know so much. So build the smallest feature you can think of that answers, the problem or the question. And then have a system to get feedback and evaluate if it's worth investing more in that direction. Oftentimes, even just by using the feature yourself, you kind of get an obvious answer of like, oh, this is good or it's not good, or it could be better in this way. And what I find is, a lot of times, if we had designed a perfect solution or our idea of a perfect solution up front, what we actually get to after iterating through various MVPs and additions to MVPs is not even remotely the same as what we thought we were setting out to build. And that's where I think teams waste a lot of time is, doing too much based off of assumptions that may or may not actually be true about what their users want and need.
Yeah. Moving towards Awtomic and what you're building now, what was the inspiration behind the company?
Yeah. So actually, my sister has a brand. She sells body products on Shopify. And, we were talking a little bit about some of the pain points that she had. And subscriptions came up both as a pain point and as something she was thinking a lot about as an opportunity. And so I got kind of excited about that. I went out and did a bunch of research on some of the really great subscription companies, both in for vertical and kind of outside of for vertical. And I wrote down this long list of things that she could do to help build her subscription program and really, maximize that more dependable monthly revenue, which is, is kind of the ideal that so many brands seek to have that kind of dependable revenue, not be so focused on just the whims of kind of transactional, who knows what, based on the season and people's current shopping habits or whatever. And so I was really excited about this list. I came back to her and I was pitching her all these things that she should set up and do. And she was like, great, that all sounds amazing. Like, how do we do it? And I started looking into it and I realized everyone who had those features for the most part had them custom built, which cost like sometimes upwards of like $50,000 at a starting point. In many cases, even the custom built solutions were really lacking when it came to the subscription management side. So even though the purchase flow is beautiful and elegant and is a great experience, once you subscribe, if you come back, what you see is just not good in terms of like being able to have functionality that seems obvious. Like maybe you subscribe to like 10 products, but then you come back and you want to change the scent or the flavor of something and there's no way to do that. There's still a lot of subscriptions that have kind of bad practices around like blocking cancellation buttons or, making it really difficult to do the things you need to do as a subscriber. And so the more I realized this, the more I realized, how much has really been kind of left on the table in terms of subscription experience. We're living in this world where now, as in e-commerce, you can use platforms like Shopify to do most of your kind of, instead of like hiring an engineer team, for example, you can rely on a platform to do most of the functionality that you need. But subscriptions was really a space where that did not feel as true. Like a lot of brands I talked to still had so much custom work done on subscriptions that they had to continuously pay for and maintain and revamp and have someone on their team who had to become a subscription e-commerce expert. And a lot of what they built was kind of, again, based on like opinions or assumptions. And then it's really hard to change, to back out of that later because you've invested so far.
Yeah.
And so it just felt like there was so much room for there to be a better platform for subscriptions that help merchants, be able to implement some of these best practices, be able to experiment over time to provide a really great experience, both on the purchase flow and on the management flow, and to just elevate, the whole experience of being a consumer of e-commerce subscriptions, which I think, up until this time, if we're being honest, has not been a great experience of the consumer. Like, I think I still struggle with this a lot, with other platforms that I manage my subscriptions on. I'll go in to pause something and there's no pause button and I can't log in. I don't remember, there's like so many issues that you run into that I think are really kind of like, blocking the growth of what is already a fast growing industry. I think, it could be even more kind of astronomical if it was actually a great experience for consumers. So we're really passionate about solving those problems and making it, a really great experience both for merchants and for consumers ultimately.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I mean, it resonates so deeply with me because I've been on the receiving end of both a poor experience and a really positive experience, if particularly with Athletic Greens. There's a supplemental drink. I'm sure if you're familiar with it, but they have a really awesome subscription process because I was moving around in different locations and I needed to pause and shift. But it actually allowed me to continue subscribing to that product because of that flexibility, because I didn't feel that it was, such a concrete decision that I couldn't take back, but it giving me the flexibility to not receive the product, but then to receive it at a later time. Like you mentioned, it gives me such it gives me such connection to that brand. So because they're catering to, my lifestyle, and a lot of people will need to pause subscriptions to continue them and manage them. And the easier to do it, I feel like the more sticky that product is to, your daily life. But tell me a little bit more about the traction that you've seen it with your company. What brands are you working with? How, or what are the numbers that you see in terms of the retention that is now that is being kind of positively influenced by your product and what you're developing for these e-commerce brands?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started early on with a kind of a hero feature that we call Build a Box. So aside from being just like a really solid, dependable subscription platform, we have this advanced functionality where as a merchant, you could define, that you want to sell items in bulk at certain interval numbers, or like with a minimum, like I want to sell at least 4, or I want to sell 4, 6, or often this is dependent on like operations requirements, like, 9 bottles fit in a box. And so I have to sell 9. But the reality is if you're selling things in bulk, whether it's for discount or operation reasons, a lot of times consumers are more open to that if they can actually pick what's in the box, and not only on purchase flow, but on an ongoing basis. And so we were the first subscription app to just build that core functionality into our subscription app to make it a great experience from a setup perspective, from a management perspective, as like, as you're doing customer support or working with customers over time. Then also for customer, from a customer perspective, being able to manage their subscription on an ongoing basis. And so as a result, we do work with a lot of folks in the food and beverage vertical, because it tends to be, it makes a lot of sense to buy like 10 juices at a time.
Yeah.
And we work with Raw Juicery, and you can go buy, I think they do 10, 15, or 20 cases of like really great fresh pressed juice. But what I think what's interesting is that it actually works for a lot more brands than you would initially think. And we've actually had some folks who have started to replace basically their whole purchase flow with our box model, because it makes for a really, really easy shopping experience, because you see all the products in one flow. You can drill down into seeing like the images and description associated with them, but ultimately it's just kind of like an add, go to cart, purchase, done experience, versus like shop all category, click in, add to cart, shop all category. So when you start to see that, it starts to get really exciting. We were able to see the average order value in our platform went from something like $53, which I think is already pretty high as an industry standard, to over $80. And that's for brands across all verticals who started to implement these things just because we offered them. In many cases, it wasn't something they were originally kind of seeking out. And so that's kind of the power behind the platform is, when we build in these really powerful tools, it may not even have been something that crossed the mind of one of the merchants on our platform until they saw it as available. They set it up. In fact, for example, I did a strategy session with one of our merchants. In the session, we set up a Build-A-Box with her products, which wouldn't typically be something that I would think of as, the strongest case for Build-A-Box. But her average order value went from like $6 to $30 within like a week. Wow. It just really resonated with her customers. And so, yeah, I think things like the average order value, conversion to subscription as well. We see when we migrate people from other platforms to ours, we see sometimes like a 50% increase right away in subscriptions, because again, the purchase experience can just be much more personalized and targeted, and it resonates more with customers. We see that people are able to simplify their product offerings, again, to the extreme level of sometimes only offering our box product, which just really streamlines the flow. Or for example, you have people who maybe had like 10 different preset bundles as a way to try to let people kind of pick what's in their bundle, just get rid of all of those and have just the one. It just makes things a lot easier, which makes conversion rates higher as well. And then lifetime value and average order value over time, we build in really, really easy ability for people to not only just swap what's in their subscription, but continuously add to their subscription, whether it's on a one-time or a subscription basis. So kind of like a Dollar Shave Club, it's like, yeah, you're always getting your razors, but if this month you want body wash, throw it in, it's just so easy. I think it's better for everyone. Like, you have a box that's going to this customer, just make it really easy for them to fill it up. And we think about that a lot, with our features as well, around really encouraging brands to make their subscribers feel like special members. So, you can offer them a discount on one-off items through our portal. You can let them have access to exclusive collections, like maybe that, non-subscribers don't even have access to. You could give them early access to new products, like new flavors or new, things that are maybe offered as pre-sale on the site could actually be something that a subscriber could add to their subscription early. So I think there are so many cool mechanics that really boost LTV ultimately for brands, that we can just make a few clicks to set up that previously would have been, months of custom development and figures crossed, that it all pans out.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I just think about how pleasant the experience has been when I've had the flexibility as a consumer, and then hearing those numbers, that's like a 500% increase for that one client you had from, $6 average order to a $30 average order. And it's all just enabling that person through technology that they didn't necessarily have to build. And it's interesting to hear that it's all had to be customizable, but it does make sense in how non-standard it is across the board. What's the biggest risk that Awtomic faces today?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, it's something we think about a lot. I would say, in general, we're like very optimistic. We see e-commerce growing. I think, there's some risk, and we've seen a bit of a slow in e-commerce. But what's interesting is if you look at the overall, obviously there was a huge jump during the pandemic, and we're kind of back on the original growth trajectory. So I don't actually see that as a major concern. I think when you look at China, they're already at like 50% of retail sales through e-commerce, and we're only at like 15. So when you think about the opportunity of, how much we could grow, I think it's huge. Within that, subscription e-commerce is growing even faster than e-commerce as a whole. So I think, there's a lot of opportunity. I think, there's a lot of competition, which is always a good motivator. And I think that ultimately, though, realistically, because of the opportunity, I'm not as worried about that.
Yeah.
I think, again, I'm super bullish on the fact that the experience with subscription e-commerce in the past has been so poor that there's also a ton of opportunity to improve there. So we're in kind of an interesting spot where, it's not as much about product market fit in the sense of like, do brands want to sell subscriptions? The answer is already yes. Do customers want to buy subscriptions? The answer is already yes. I think the biggest risk ultimately is like, are we the best answer? And so that's what we strive to be. Like, are we the best solution for brands and customers? And so that's kind of constantly the risk and the opportunity that we're thinking about.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. If everything goes well, what's the long-term vision for Awtomic?
Yeah, if everything goes well, I mean, we'd love to be kind of the go-to subscription management platform for Shopify and for other platforms as well. I think that, there's a lot of power really being able to help customers automate their purchases. And so I see a future where subscriptions are actually the most convenient way to buy the products you love. Like, I think, even for my own life, I would love for it to be the case that most things in my bathroom, in my kitchen, in my laundry room, and my pet stuff, my kids stuff, just shows up when I want it to show up. And, we're really pretty far from that still. And so I think, that's the future we believe in, is not only that it is the case that people prefer to buy their products on subscription, and we are the ones that facilitate that, but that also, people are, because we are, a platform for direct to consumer brands, people are able to buy those products directly from the brands that they love, that have missions or aesthetics or whatever it is that they value, that serves them. So I think, for example, a lot of our brands are sustainable. A lot of our brands maybe have like a certain quality or, whatever it is that speaks directly to their kind of cohort of users. And more people make their buying decisions based off of, what a brand represents. And that's really important to people. I think mission-driven brands have seen a lot of success over the past few years. And I think, that will make their relationship with customers stickier. And so, whereas now it may be more convenient to go buy things from Amazon and just get whatever shows up in the search results, we would really love to facilitate it being a better experience to buy things from the brands directly that, speak to your values.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the most common subscription that a lot of people use is Amazon. But even when I've never done it because it feels so locked into something that is like 80% of what I want, but just like 90% just more convenient than most things. But really, it's like a hunger as a consumer to purchase the things I want for the missions or the things you named as well, or the reasons you named as well. So I'm excited about, where you're taking this, because that just means that, the beauty products that I get, or the pet food products that I get for my cat, or anything, it makes it more accessible to get it from the businesses that I'm excited about, or whose mission I'm, passionate about. I know we're coming close to time, and I always like to ask this question for both selfish research and research for my audience, but what books or people have influenced you the most?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2020, I went through Y Combinator as an accelerator program. I feel like it's a little cliche, but it has huge influence on me. It has for, many years even before going through the program. But I find that one of the things that is the most helpful for me as a founder is to be connected to other founders. And so I maintain really close relationships with a lot of the founders from my batch and, check in with them regularly. I think it's a somewhat unique experience, and being able to connect with people who are going through similar things on a regular basis has been super valuable. And then also the advisors from YC I find just have incredible clarity that they're able to provide, in the sense that you can get an opinion from anyone. But I find that my YC advisors are able to like tell me patterns and show me examples that really illustrate the answer to almost any question that I have.
Yeah.
And so I find like as a resource, even beyond the batch, that my advisors and my kind of group of founders there have been just incredibly helpful.
Yeah. Is there anyone in particular that you want to give a shout out to?
Yes, Dalton Caldwell is my main advisor, and he just I always tell people that if I'm ever kind of deep in the weeds on something and I just can't pull my head out of it, if I have like a 20-minute talk with him, I come out with like complete clarity.
Love that.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited that we're at the end here because I think we could talk about the influence of what you're doing and how it's going to influence, I think, products and consumers actually in very positive ways and kind of spread the whole e-commerce kind of ecosystem. But last little bit is I always like to give my founders, my guests here, the opportunity to give us their plugs. So let us know where we can support Awtomic. What's your LinkedIn's, your Twitters, your Facebooks, your Instagrams, whatever. Where can we be supportive and part of the vision?
Yes, great question. I think both Twitter and LinkedIn are kind of popular channels for us, and we're on the Shopify App Store. So anyone either currently on Shopify or considering moving to Shopify, we definitely see strategy, onboarding, support as a big part of our product experience. So we're always happy to connect directly with people, who install our app or thinking about it, who are looking for a demo. A lot of what we do is kind of help usher people into the Shopify world as well. So yes, don't hesitate to reach out to our team or to me directly. And on Twitter, LinkedIn, email, Intercom, all the places. To check out awtomic.com. We have links to most of these things there.
Incredible. Emily, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so excited to share this with the audience and promote, and hopefully help promote your business more. And so that I can get the things I want and that everybody else can on a subscription basis. But I really hope you enjoyed yourself. And again, thank you so much for being on the show.
I did. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great talking to you.